Yeah. All right, let's call the meeting to order. First order of business is the minutes of March 6, 2025 meeting. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at those. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
Seconded? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay, so we'll open up the public comments. And is there anyone to comment?
Here.
Okay.
Makes it quick.
All right, so then we'll move on to the board briefing and business.
All right. So, board briefing, under completed projects, the Delano Park Historic Structures Report, Cultural Landscape Report, and Master Plan are two images out of the master plan. One of them is showing how 8th Avenue, when it goes through the park, could be better addressed both for pedestrians and for parking. The other is showing what it would look like if the 10th Avenue entrance were aligned straight with 10th. I've got hard copies of, I still don't have the hard copy yet for the cultural landscape report, but I have hard copies of the master plan and the HSR if y'all would like to see them. I also have them in digital form where I can put them so you can take a look at them. Right now, as you probably recall, we do not have a person who is overseeing Park and Rec. The city is in the process of hiring a new director for Park and Rec. So there's not going to be any movement or discussion on this for several months because we need to have a new person come in and sort of get up and running, and then we'll figure out what is next with that.
Could I ask a question though about, and I don't really know what I'm looking at here, but I had a question I think before, maybe it wasn't in this meeting, but about we were going to put basketball goals and that kind of thing in Delano Park. Did we squelch that?
Their basketball court currently in Delano.
Right, but we're going to add something for
what was being proposed is the area by the existing baseball court, which is where the basketball court is, was to make that a Miracle League field, and then to swap out the existing, sort of rearrange all of that. And you can take a look at the visuals on it in the master plan if you want to add in basketball courts. I think they're called junior size. I don't remember the detail, that you can do wheelchair tournaments in for basketball, and to integrate them into that landscape more so that it's more of an integrated unit as opposed to sort of random placement. So that was a proposed portion.
Is this an appropriate time for me to say something about that? Or
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay. We can't even get enough. Years and years ago, the foundation at the hospital funded a playground for people that had needs. Nobody ever used it. It was done by Eagle Scout, and then we finished the rest of the month. But we can't even get a team together for any kind of sport for these children. So I just think we ought to look at, is it going to be used?
It was something that Park and Rec requested because they do have requests for that. So that's probably a discussion to have with the new person that comes in.
When did
Because
Parks and Rec talk to the school system? Because that's who told me they couldn't put a team together.
because right now they've got, I want to say that Huntsville had one, and maybe Hartselle or Coleman, I think maybe. But they were looking at other places that had them and what it would take to retrofit that field.
I'm all
So-
for doing more and more and more for people that have needs, but not if we're not going to use it. I mean, it's just kind of
No, and the school district and Park and Rec both reviewed these plans. So the school district has seen it, Park and Rec saw it, everyone, all the stakeholders have reviewed it in multiple stages. So,
Okay.
but it's certainly something when we get a new director to circle
Okay,
back in.
sure.
And even within the plans for Delano, this is probably not the immediate highest priority. I don't know how they have ranked
Sure.
them out off the top of my head.
Thank you.
So-
Because it was somebody involved with the school system that I talked to, that talked to me, and
Yeah.
thank you.
Let's see. And the project's nearing completion. Why is this not working? There we go. Albany, 2nd Avenue. So this one is nearing completion. This one is now going through review at the state. This is an update for 2nd Avenue within Albany, the commercial portion. We're going to have Jamie cover this. Jamie is with Eocene. That is the company that has been doing the work on this. And Jamie, there is your first slide.
Stand right here.
I will
Okay.
let you go.
Good to see you guys all again. So this project started in 2021, 22 maybe. I did the resurvey of the historic district and then an expanded area outside of the district to kind of assess whether for an update for National Register nomination and possible boundary increase. So here we are now in 2025. The district was initially listed in 1995, and then a boundary increase occurred in 1999, which just added, at the time, the Decatur Light Power and Fuel Company building, which unfortunately is no longer extant. So I will get started here. Did I go backwards? It doesn't look like my slide. Where are the words? Well, there was some objectives here. I'll just read them from my, I don't know what happened to them. So the nomination includes a boundary decrease of approximately 3.3 acres, and that's really just due to large-scale infill construction and the demolition of several historic buildings. And it also includes an increase of 30 additional acres to include all the buildings that were traditionally expected to occur within a central business district, including those that really document the continued development of New Decatur's downtown area through the post-World War II era. So several things are occurring in this nomination update. First of all, we are extending the period of significance from 1941 to 1979 to account for that post-World War II era development. The nomination does maintain the areas of significance that were documented in the original nomination, but expand upon those in the historic context, focusing particularly on post-World War II growth. As amended, the district includes a total of 85 resources, 64 of which are contributing and only 21 non-contributing. A large portion of the nomination is also updating the resource inventory. There are several discrepancies that were discovered from the original nomination. So those are updated. 9 resources in the original nomination were found to be demolished. So those are removed from the inventory. And then, of course, we're adding the 40 additional resources that comprise the boundary increase area and updating contributing status of the resources based on that extended period of significance and any visible alterations that we've seen since 1995 when it was initially nominated. So here's a map that on the right, the aerial shows the amended boundary as a whole. The map on the left shows the boundary decrease area, which is shaded yellow, and then the boundary increase, which is the large green area. So there's a lot of expansion of the district. And then,
Could you give me the streets, because I can't see.
okay.
Do you want me to read them off for you, Jane?
Yes, please, I guess. Oh, I have glasses too on my head.
So expansion is to go on First Avenue and Fourth Avenue because those were not in the district originally. And this also is going to include some of the cross streets like Grant between Second and Fourth, Johnston between Second and Fourth, Moulton between Second and
Second
Fourth.
floor, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Okay. And then this map is just the final National Register map that shows the distribution of non-contributing resources, and those are shown in blue. And the hatched parcels are vacant lots or parking lots. So as amended, buildings within the updated district range in date from the 1880s through the present. Most of the earliest surviving resources are those within the original district along the 2nd Avenue commercial corridor. As you can see here, the 1920s saw the most significant surge in development throughout the business district, and most of that post-World War II through the 60s and into the 70s development does take place in the boundary increase area. Okay, so most of the historic context was covered by the original nomination, and you'll probably already know the history, so I'll just touch on the points that are relevant, particularly to the boundary increase and the additional context that we're adding to the nomination. As you know, the city was laid out in 1887 as a progressive New South city, continued the gridded street plan as the Old Town, The city planners of New Decatur included distinct sectors of the new city, including an area reserved for manufacturing district and another set aside as a business district. In this area, the business district comprised not only 2nd Avenue, which did emerge as the principal commercial corridor, but also a larger area that extended east and south towards residential areas and west to the railroad corridor. So together, this business district, as it was planned for the original design of the city, generally comprises the amended historic district that we're presenting here. In 1889, New Decatur was officially chartered, and Decatur and New Decatur functioned as separate entities, yet they too were closely intertwined due to their proximity and the shared railroad and river resources. Development of New Decatur following its inception was almost instantaneous. There were 2 early hotels planned by developers to attract visitors and investors. Both are shown here on this 1888 bird's eye view reproduction. Opposite the railroad depot on First Avenue was the large site of the planned building Casa Grande Hotel. It was initially planned as a really monumental building in New Decatur. However, this illustration shown here is just a conceptual drawing, and that large-scale hotel was never built. Instead, a smaller hotel was erected on 2nd Avenue in 1904, and that's shown there at the bottom right. The other hotel that we see here is the Tavern Hotel, and that is located within the boundary increase area, located at the southwest corner of the intersection of 6th Avenue and Grant Street. It was built by the Decatur Land Company and was among the most luxurious hotels in Alabama during its heyday. Unfortunately, it is no longer extant, but it speaks towards that planned development and trying to attract investors into New Decatur. The first known church in New Decatur Business District was the Central Baptist Church, completed in 1896 at the corner of Grant Street and 6th Avenue. Unfortunately, that is also no longer extant. But the following year, the first Christian church was completed in 1897 on Moulton Street, and it is the earliest church surviving within the amended district. By the turn of the 20th century, New Decatur was thriving. An article in the New Decatur Advertiser in 1907 boasts that the new city is undoubtedly one of the best laid out and improved cities in the South. Another article that year documents the numerous benefits in New Decatur while luring investors in new industries, and that such luxuries included excellent electric and gas plants for lighting and heating, 2 local and long-distance telephones, sewer, telegraph, schools, churches of various denominations, hotels, and 2 banks. And most notable was the access to the railroads. So nearly 40 buildings within the amended district were built between 1900 and the 1930s. All occurred within the central commercial district along 2nd Avenue and its immediate cross streets, basically comprising most of the original 1995 historic district. Within the boundary increase, notable buildings built during the first quarter of the 20th century include the Church of St. Anne, built in 1906, the first Southern Bell Telephone and Telegraph Company building in around 1920, and the Grant Street Church of Christ, built circa 1925. To avoid confusion with the city names, in September of 1916, New Decatur was renamed to Albany, a name favored by the many Northerners that established businesses here. Albany was short-lived, however, when it quickly became clear that the 2 cities would benefit the most by combining their resources. So New Decatur was annexed into Decatur in 1927 to form a single municipality. Are the words coming up? Oh, there it goes. Following World War II, nationwide, we know suburbanization and increased automobile ownership and the resulting development of commercial strips and malls outside of downtowns resulted in the decline of America's main streets. Such was the case along the commercial corridor on 2nd Avenue. To compete with suburban commercial development, several commercial businesses along 2nd Avenue upgraded their storefronts in an attempt to appear sleeker and more modern. However, many businesses were forced to close. Any new construction after the post-war years in New Decatur's business district tended to occur within the boundary increase area. And some of those include the former Atlas Auto Financing building, shown in the top left, and I love that building. The Monarch Supermarket, shown on the bottom left, and Culver's Cleaner on the top right. And the cleaners served the residents of Decatur for nearly 70 years, and that's a great little building as well. 3 prominent mid-century modern mid-rise banks were constructed within the boundary increase, including the First Federal Savings and Loan in 1957, the former First National Bank in 1959, and the First American Bank in 1963. The First Federal Building's undergone considerable alterations, and so it is classified as non-contributing to the district. The others are well preserved. So nationwide, during the post-war years, the religious revival swept the country, largely spurred by the baby boom and a much improved economy. Newly formed congregations erected churches, whereas earlier church congregations experienced an unprecedented membership growth, resulting in the need for larger facilities. And New Decatur was no exception to this national phenomenon. You see the first Christian church received an extensive remodeling in 1942 when its present tower was completed and the stone veneer applied. A large wing was also added by 1960. St. Anne's Catholic Church grew considerably during the post-war years. In around 1945, a rectory was built, and in 1955, the church added a school and convent annex. And the Grant Street Church of Christ also saw a large education annex built in 1953. During the mid-20th century, the blocks between 4th and 6th Avenues really evolved to accommodate increased auto ownership and encourage suburbanites to patronize downtown Decatur businesses. Large parking lots emerged here, as well as auto dealerships and repair shops and filling stations. The large mid-rise bank buildings that I showed earlier also featured convenient drive-through banking, which would attract customers. Among the most notable buildings built here in this area is the former Motel 6 mid-rise hotel. Although it's undergone extensive exterior alterations, many of those changes might be considered reversible, and future rehabilitation to return it to its historic appearance would be an excellent opportunity for a rehabilitation tax credit project, just throwing that in there. It is presently considered non-contributing to the district, but Caroline and I both agreed that we should include it for its potential to undergo rehabilitation. West of the 2nd Avenue corridor in the original historic district is the Decatur Daily building, built in 1972. It's a large office building and is a contributing element to the boundary increase. During the 60s and 70s, Operation New Decatur was an urban renewal effort with many initiatives. Among those was the revitalization of downtown, which by that time was in a state of decline. And the city erected a wide concrete canopy during that period along some of the commercial blocks fronting 2nd Avenue with the idea to offer a pedestrian-friendly corridor comparable to the covered walkways of the suburban commercial shopping strips and malls that were drawing customers away from main streets. The canopies provided shade and protection from weather, yet they were highly insensitive to the historic aesthetic of the district. Not only did the canopies directly impact the building's facades, but they also concealed the historic storefronts. The installation of the canopies proved largely ineffective in revitalizing the 2nd Avenue commercial district. However, preservation initiatives in the 90s, including the designation of the historic district in 1905, shortly thereafter resulted in the removal of these canopies to reveal the beautiful facades and storefronts you see today. So the 1995 nomination also included an area of significance for entertainment and recreation for containing 2 historic theaters that were cultural centers for Decatur's residents. got the Princess Theater and the Cotico, did I pronounce that correctly? Opera House, thank you, Opera House. As amended, however, the Princess Theater is going to be removed from the historic district as part of the boundary decrease, and this was simply because it's surrounded by non-contributing buildings, and we wanted to avoid gaps or kind of donuts in that district. It is my understanding that it is planned to be individually designated to the National Register. The Opera House, since it was listed,
Tell me why again, didn't include the princess?
because it's surrounded by non-contributing buildings, and that's part of the boundary decrease. So it would, if we kept them in, it would be kind of like a hole in the district boundary. With the Opera House, since it was initially listed on the National Register, both as contributing to the district and individually, new information has come to light. Thank you for sharing it with me, by the way. The nominations indicate a construction date of 1890 for the Opera House, and that it was built by the Cotico Opera House Company, when in fact the company never established a theater in Decatur or New Decatur. It was actual construction date of 1906 and built for the New Decatur Opera House Company. Renamed in 1907 the Payne Theater, and in 1909 it was purchased by Freemasons and renamed the Masonic Theater. So this is all updating in that nomination, these new facts. Okay, so most of the architectural styles are touched on in the original nomination, so I won't, so I'll just quickly kind of run through some of the notable trends that we see here. Commercial architecture is dominated by 1- and 2-part commercial blocks of brick or concrete construction with flat roofs. Most of these are concentrated along 2nd Avenue and are among the oldest surviving resources within the district. There's about 15 commercial buildings within the amended district that don't necessarily conform to your traditional 1- or 2-part commercial block, which would share adjacent walls that you would typically see on a historic Main Street. These are mostly located in the boundary increase area and are attributed to post-World War II growth. Some of these include, again, the Atlas Auto Financing and Dealership Building, and the Culver's Cleaners, the Decatur Shoe Repair, and then a former Greyhound bus station, and I think that's a really neat building too. Oh, look, okay, sorry, it didn't show up correctly on the slide there. Nearly half of New Decatur's commercial buildings do lack stylistic influences. The majority within the district reveal elements of what's kind of called the commercial style. And occurrences range from restrained representations to more elaborate iterations. And you can see with the corbelled cornice or parapets, sometimes there's shaped parapets, inset brick panels in the upper facades, wide transoms above the storefront, and the storefronts are usually recessed or flushed. So just some of the examples or identifying features of what is referred to as the commercial style. Modernist architecture embraced technological advances in materials and construction methods while rejecting applied ornamentation and references to the past. Modernist design focused on simplicity, spatial clarity, and maximizing interior exposure to daylight. The new district, or amended district, excuse me, includes 2 modernist styles, the International style and Brutalist. There are 3 examples of the International style, which use modern materials such as concrete, glass, and steel, rejection of non-essential decoration, ribbon windows with glass curtain walls, and flat roofs. And those 3 buildings include the First American Bank, the First National Bank, and the Motel 6. And the First American Bank is a really excellent example of international style. Brutalism emerged in the 1960s and placed an emphasis on mass, weightiness, roughness, and solidity, most often used in the design of institutional buildings such as libraries, courthouses, and public housing. There's only 1 building in the district that is a brutalist design, and that's the Southern Bell Building, completed in 1963. The design of commercial facades and storefronts changed considerably following World War II. Many older commercial blocks were upgraded to compete with commercial strips outside of downtown. And here are just some of the identifying features of a typical modernist post-war storefront. Most significant is the introduction of an open or visual front that makes the interior space of the store the actual display. Large aluminum framed plate glass windows are common, and angled entries were also common. And this is the storefront upgrade for the former J.C. Penney building, which is an excellent example of a post-World War II upgrade. And then also in the boundary increase are 3 historic churches, and all reflect elements of the Gothic Revival style. So the 85 surviving buildings within the amended district do chronicle the various periods of growth and development of the New South city of New Decatur, laid out in 1887 and intentionally designed to appeal to industrialists and entrepreneurs. During the post-World War II years and following the 1928 annexation into the city of Decatur, a new phase of commercial growth ensued, expanding outward into what was initially planned by the developers as that larger business district sector. This development is distinctive from the earlier commercial growth in that the buildings were typically larger in scale, including mid-rise financial institutions, a hotel, office buildings, the colossal Bell South building, and smaller freestanding businesses. Also noteworthy are the few transportation-related buildings attributed to increased traffic along 6th Avenue. Excuse me. The majority of the resources contribute to the district, and the streetscapes throughout continue to convey the distinct development patterns and periods of economic prosperity and growth. The removal of the insensitive concrete canopy along 2nd Avenue storefronts has further enhanced the historic aesthetic of the central commercial corridor within the district. So that's the nomination. The draft is with the State Historic Preservation Office undergoing review right now, and I think we're on the agenda in September to present. So it'll be a little waiting pattern until then, but any questions?
Buildings that are being built by Alabama Center for the Arts, what are they going to fall into?
Those are in the boundary decrease area. Well, there's a new hotel and a new parking garage. Those are within the district. But yeah, the art school, those buildings are in the boundary decrease.
Some of the ones that exist, not the one that's to be built.
What about the dormitory?
That is outside the boundaries. So a building,
Okay.
to be contributing within the district, it needs to be typically 50 years old or older. So new buildings are listed as not contributing.
Okay, so all of the
Yeah,
above.
so
Okay, good.
that
Yeah.
influences how a boundary is designed, because if you have a whole lot of new construction, you're not going to continue a boundary around sort of a dead zone. You're going to pull it back in tight to the buildings that are historic.
So that's kind of why Princess was not.
Yeah, because the Princess ended up sort of being floating by itself. Because as an individual, it still has tremendous historic.
It's a wonderful
But
building.
as part of a historic district, it's lost by itself, so that's why we discussed with the state putting it on by itself.
Say, I'm glad you included the hotel. So it was built as the downtowner.
Oh, is that what okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it was even more remarkable looking. It had pastel, all those little squares.
Yeah,
were pastel.
Yeah, I think I came across a photo of that. I'm not sure if it was the photo I included in the PowerPoint. Yeah, it was really neat.
I
Yeah.
know there's one, at least on Route 66, that is listed as national.
Okay. Yeah.
So they were scattered throughout the country.
I like
I'm glad
seeing
y'all
people.
included that, because I think it's reversible too.
Yeah.
I would love to see somebody do
That, yeah, it'd be a fabulous rehabilitation tax credit project if anyone's so inclined. Any other questions? Well, thank you, everyone. It's good to see you all again, and I hope to be back here soon. You enjoy the rest of your meetings. Sorry.
Touch base
Yes, yeah.
after you review the state's comments.
Okay. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
So the state National Register Board, they meet twice a year. They meet in April and they meet again in September. So to be on the September docket, we'd only have to have things turned in by June to give them time to process it and get it ready. So the state just finished the first review. They just responded today, but I don't think she's seen their comments yet because she was on the road. And so it'll go through another revision. And then in our September meeting, you guys will be able to see a copy of it then, because as a CLG, we have the legal, we are consulting party, so we review it and give our feedback before it goes in front of the full board in Montgomery. Update on another current project, Old State Bank. We are finalizing construction documents and cost estimating. I'm expecting the report in about a week and a half from them, so that as we go into the budget for 2026, we'll have some numbers on what it will take to get this building up and moving again as all of the challenges are addressed. So excited to see that coming along. Any questions on this project?
The funding that I read that we got from Senator Old, is that from the Historical Commission?
Yes, that funding will funnels through them. We have,
So do we think we're okay?
yes, because that's state funding, not federal funding. So we have about $1 million from the state to go towards this rehabilitation, but it's going to take several million to get it back up and running. Yeah. Big, old building, old big problems. So.
But fabulous building.
It really is. The Carnegie Conditions Assessment, they're working on that. They have the engineering team out looking at it. I should be getting a draft probably within about a month once they go through that building. We have one that we need a vote on. So they were supposed to be here this evening, but they weren't for some reason. They must have gotten tied up. Phone message. Nope. So Muscle Shoals National Heritage Area, they are putting together a series of markers throughout all of the counties that they work in. And they have large markers and small markers. Decatur gets one. We're getting one of the large markers. They want to put it fairly close to Old State Bank, the exact site we have not determined yet. And so in terms of what it will look like, this is sort of the template. So you see it's got one big picture in the background and then text on the right-hand side. For our particular marker, the background image is showing troops, and they're still being...
It's not going to be that.
They changed it again? When did they change it?
I spoke to Kurt today.
Okay.
It's going to be more like that one that you just saw from Lauderdale. It's
Okay.
sort of like a bird's eye view,
Okay.
showing the field of battle,
Okay.
fortifications. So that's my understanding, unless it changes.
And this is what you're talking about.
This is the one.
Yeah, this is the template that they sent to show what a completed one would be like. And the two drawings they sent me this drawing for the background image, and for the inset image, it was the image that had the bank in the
I
background.
think the inset image is the same, but the background
is
is going to be closer to that. Yeah.
Okay.
So more of a bird's eye view.
Okay.
District.
And then that means that their background painting description is going to change too. They have not sent me an updated one on that.
Well,
Yeah, I'll have to follow up with them on that. So the thing that John and I were focused on, they had sent original text, and they have a limited amount of space on trying to discuss Decatur and the Civil War. And John and I were reading it, and we found some discrepancies that we felt weren't entirely accurate. So we did a proposed text version, and that is in the paperwork that you have. John, have you talked to him about that at all? When you talked
about the edits?
text change? No. Okay. And part of the HPC is approving verbiage in any signage that's historic related within city right away or on city property. And so this is one of those things that we need to have a vote on by y'all if you accept it, amend it. And so that is on the proposed text. So that's the one that's on my caption, which just describes the Old State Bank, federal troops. And then I guess the background description is going to change, but it's not going to be, we'll have to wait on that.
It may be able to, I mean, because I believe the idea was that it's supposed to be like a snapshot of when that charge occurred.
Oh, so they want to zoom it out more?
I think,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, so it might be the same text, just
could be, yeah.
pictures more of a bird's eye view versus a close-up view?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm glad we're getting markers. It's great.
Yes, Nights is part of a series.
Yeah.
across North Alabama.
Do we have a nomination? I mean, we have a motion, excuse me.
To approve your verbiage or to approve the sign?
To approve the proposed text.
It's different in a couple of ways. One thing, the original text was misleading to say that it was Decatur was occupied. It looks like they're saying Decatur was occupied by U.S. forces from 1862 to 65 continuously, which is not true. So we changed that saying it was periodically occupied. And then Caroline thought, and I thought as well, that it was important to talk about how the town was, get a little more specific about how the town was destroyed and a handful of buildings that did survive and name them specifically. I thought it was,
I think that's
I think it reads
very
better.
important, yeah. Because people still don't know sometimes the three properties and say, well, both survived. Well, if you need a motion, if you and John had regurgitated this a lot,
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the proposed text created for the sign that will be placed.
Is there a second?
I say,
All right, all in favor? Aye.
All right, I will reach back to my contact and I will follow up. I think they'll be back in September to do the final. That's when they should have more details there. These will be placed in 2026, so you will see them again when they come back with more detail. But at this point, we were trying just to get the text all lined up. Let me get my notes. See, it was Angie and then Trudy, correct?
yes.
So, funding updates. I cannot recall if I had updated on the underrepresented community grant in March. I may have. So this is one where we received a grant. I went back in and asked for a second, knowing that it was going to be unlikely that we got it because it's kind of like going through the buffet line twice before everybody's been served. But I went ahead and asked. I was told no. But I'm still going to be working with Cedar Lake and sort of that community, trying to look at maybe putting one of the churches on the National Register down there. So that's on the horizon. It's just going to take a whole lot longer because we don't have the budget to bring in a consultant to do the work. Did apply for a HERS grant to help fund Old State Bank. We did not get that. They funded 8 in the entire U.S. So to say that it was competitive is an understatement. And I looked at the ones that won, and all of the ones that won, hers is a history of underrepresented, history of equal rights. So that is whether it's women fighting for equal rights, whether it's African Americans, anyone that's really fighting for their rights. And with Old State Bank, we had the story of the first female architect, the first female to run, but that wasn't the bank's purpose. They were just like tangential to the bank. The sites that won were like a school built for Native Americans, a historic Black theater. So they were like sites that were specifically, the entire site was for that population. And so that would have made us not nearly as competitive in the rankings to begin with, because we have a great building, but its story is not as central to this grant process as some of the other applicants. And then I was assisting First Missionary Baptist getting funding under a civil rights grant. They did not receive it, but I've not seen the feedback on that because I didn't submit that. They submitted it. So I've asked them to go ahead to send me, because you can ask for the reviewer's notes. And then I told them that we'll just resubmit next year. We'll figure out what they thought the weak spots were. We're going to go in. It might be they do not have a nonprofit status dedicated just to this building. And so typically like 16th Street Baptist in Birmingham or some of the civil rights churches in Selma, like the church is a congregation, they have their mission as the gospel in the church, but they will have a separate nonprofit whose mission is the actual building. And normally that is required to get one of these because they want to see a clear demarcation in terms of how the nonprofit is set up. And it might be that First Missionary Baptist just didn't have that key piece of the puzzle to rank highly enough. So that's why I've asked them to go ahead and share with me the reports when they get it back, and I will go in and work with them. And I said, we'll just get ready. We got a whole year to get ready for it next time. We do have some newly funded grants that we're notified of. This is a state grant, so it's not federal, it's state. We had asked for funding to take our educational materials on historic residential architecture for Old Decatur and Albany, and that was revised in 2023, and to take it and sort of make it graphically strong, to put it on the website, maybe have it interactive where people could really learn about the different styles. Because right now it's a very static document, so this is essentially hiring a graphic designer to go in and just make it very lush, make it very user-friendly, so that the data doesn't change, but the presentation changes. And that's what we have. We just received that funding award notice, I believe started last week. Also worked with tourism on a second educational trust fund grant. You might recall last year we had the resources to update Old Decatur and Albany. Those are old digital tours that are on the city's website that tourism promotes, but we did not have one for Old Town. And so I requested funding to create a third one just on Old Town. It will follow the model of the other two, but it'll sort of be our triad to complete with our three major National Register districts to really focus on that. And so that is something that we will definitely, as we get to the point, I've been out with a photographer already taking photos. As we get to the point where we're down selecting buildings and doing content within the HPC, we will have you guys looking at it to review it, to sort of see, like, is it working? Do you need more? Do you need less? With the understanding that it's still within the same framework, the same pattern as the other two. So we're going to keep that rhythm. And then we'll also be working with other historians as well to be reviewing it and making sure that we have any good historic images. I'm going to have Fort John digging through archives left and right as we set this up. But I'm very pleased that we were able to at least get both of these funded for this next year. I don't have a slide for it. For a possible future grant, the city did approve me applying for a certified local government grant on surveying the area around Walter Jackson. It's a big area. It probably have to be surveyed in two parts because it's just too large. So I've been given the approval to apply for that grant, but we haven't had that grant opportunity open yet. And then that comes into our next item, which is the letter. You have a draft letter in front of you to both of our federal senators. So if you read the letter, if you couldn't already remember the history of preservation law, it was sort of like a really brief primer on, in 1966, the federal government passed the National Historic Preservation Act into law. And actually one of the main people behind that was Alabama Congressman Albert Raines. He had a special committee on historic preservation. He chaired it. Very interested in historic preservation and ensuring that federal projects did not damage important sites at the local level. So this Preservation Act, this law, required the establishment of state historic preservation offices in every state to essentially be a liaison between the federal government and the local and state governments. State preservation offices have always been a partnership between the federal government and state and local. And you hear a lot about the government giving unfunded mandates. Right? They pass laws, but they don't give you any money. They funded this mandate. It took them a little bit of time. It took them about 10 years, but they created the Historic Preservation Fund. And it is funded solely through offshore oil and gas drilling lease revenues. And that funding is what covers this sort of multi-governmental agency, the State Historic Preservation Offices and their relationship. So this fund is the primary source of matching grant funds to our State Historic Preservation Office. So money from this fund is appropriated annually by Congress. It goes to the different state agencies to carry out federally mandated duties of the Historic Preservation Act. Our State Historic Preservation Office is part of the Alabama Historical Commission, so that's who manages that in this state. They've not been able to apply for funds from fiscal year 2025 because even though Congress appropriated them in March, the federal government has frozen it. So our state is unable to access those funds that were approved by Congress and are ready to be distributed. They're not the only state. Every state is having this issue. A large percentage of the staff people in the different state agencies, their salary is covered in part by this funding. So some states are laying off preservation staff. Once Ohio laid off, I'm going to say between a third and a half. I have to go double check my numbers. So this is very real, and it's happening across the board. So this means that Alabama is in a freezing pattern. They can't apply for funding that was already appropriated by Congress and approved by Congress, but it just has not been released. This is really important because my contacts at the state that I work with, we have a certified local government person who manages the grants. Our historic tax credit reviewer, our National Register nominations, our historic environmental review, all of these positions are paid for with that funding. We also get our grant money. So our underrepresented community grant, it comes out of that pot of money. The civil rights grants, the HERS grants, all of the grants. And you saw I listed a whole page of all the different grants that I've tapped into in the last 5 years. And we get access to that money because we're a certified local government. So we have filled out a special agreement with the state, and the feds have certified it. There are 35 certified local governments in Alabama, and what that means is we have this legal agreement that allows us to access a minimum of 10% of the state's annual allotment from the Historic Preservation Fund. So not releasing that funding undermines the legal agreement that we have locally with the state governments and the federal governments, because we're doing everything we're supposed to do to get access to that money, but those funds are not being released. So that's fiscal year 2025. Fiscal year 2026, the budget reconciliation bill passed by the House of Representatives proposed completely eliminated the Historic Preservation Fund for 2026, I think with the exception of some historic black colleges that receive funding. The rest of it was eliminated. So it's the withdrawal of federal support is going to result in essentially decimating all these programs that are supported, and it also means we'll have staff laid off at the state level because their salaries are covered by this budget. So I listed out, and John and I went through it. We sat down, we went through a whole list of the different grants that this city, I mean, you can see really all of these things have been sort of moving forward. We also have so many Section 106 reviews, and this is what keeps our cell phone towers in check, historic tax credit reviews, and other expert professional assistance that I couldn't even list off appropriately. I probably call the state a minimum of once a week. It's not uncommon for them to get 5-6 calls from me in a week, talking to different people as we're moving through different projects. I think of them as like a branch office. They're incredibly helpful. So we are coming up on our nation's 250th birthday. There's a tremendous amount of pressure for local history and to be involved, and this is a time when the federal government is frozen or is clawing back preservation funding. So John and I talked about the importance of making sure that our elected representatives understand how this money is being used at the local level, because sometimes they don't know. Senator Tuberville's office I actually reached out to when applying for the underrepresented community grants. They wrote a letter of support several years ago for that, but they might not be aware of how deep this funding runs and how integral it is. And so that was the idea of maybe sending a letter and letting them understand that this is really important. Typically, John, if we're asked to do a letter last minute, he just signs it with his name, but this is one we were looking at if it comes from the whole board, wanting the whole board to review it. And we can certainly put everyone's name on there as well. But I'll open that up for a discussion between you all.
Yeah, I read the letter, and I think your letter's great. I think probably worth back the papers on it. But I would ask, I know sometimes when we were trying to really get the attention of folks in DC, our people from the hospital, we would ask our employees to write letters. I mean, would it be helpful if a lot of people supported this?
I mean,
I don't know how it works anymore, but I mean,
yes, so it certainly is something if you're sending letters as the board, then that's sort of, and I can put everyone's signature on it, but that counts for the board, so y'all have been with a letter. But if you want to distribute copies of this to colleagues or friends that you think, hey, like the Morgan County Historical Society, John, you could let them know and say, hey, this is really important. Are y'all aware of this change and how that's going to impact federal, the laws and how these are enforced? I think
we should do that.
Definitely.
And if you don't have to write a letter, I mean, if they could just say, we've attached the letter you received, or something, whatever y'all want to do. But I just think that, they do have a little check mark by how many names.
And I think phone calls is definitely also, so even if you tell people, hey, we drafted this letter that we use, but if you want to call your local rep, my understanding is that they actually respond better to phone calls, but in this case it would be a formal letter from us because that's a little different for you as a board. But definitely if you have friends, if you know genealogical societies, historic societies, anyone that might be interested, because the funding really does make a difference and it really is a partnership. I don't know why they thought it was a duplicate effort. It's like, well, no, they bring money to the table and resources to the table, and then we bring money and resources to the table. So it's a huge. And then I put up the images on here. The one on the left-hand side, it just says Historic Preservation Under Threat. This is from the National Council of State Historic Preservation Offices. So they have a webpage. They have put out a call to alert the immediate threat with the funds not being released, and then the fiscal year 2026 threat with them being zeroed out, and the fact that there's no tax money that goes into this. There's absolutely not a dime of tax money in this program. And that it was so bipartisan, like Alabama senator is the one that started it, that they wanted it, our history was that important. We really want to understand our history. And then on the right is the National Park Service website. That is a screenshot where it says, what are the benefits for being a CLG when you enter into this? And they're saying, you get annual appropriations from the Historic Preservation Fund. So City of Decatur is a CLG. We have checked all these boxes. We expect to have access to that fund, which is sort of the carrot for joining in at that level. So are there any questions on this? Or John, do you want to entertain a motion?
Yeah, if there's anybody have any other suggestions or comments? No? But you're going to need to vote on it.
And I can list everybody's name if you want me to.
That's up to whatever you feel.
List everyone's name down? I can put
If you want
everyone's
to say from the board, maybe you should put everybody's name.
Okay, so I'll have your signature on it, but then I'll have everyone's name under it. Okay.
So we're sending it just to the senators. What about the House?
So the House already voted, but if you want, I can send a copy to the House just so they know if the budget gets kicked back to them. Absolutely, I will add them on there. So that would be, let's see, I think that's Dale Strong. I'll double check. Okay.
It is Dale.
Okay.
Yeah, strong.
We're looking for a motion.
Okay.
I move that the letter supporting preservation funding be sent, and then it's approved, and be sent to the senators.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Okay. And then lastly, for training, I've sent this out to y'all. We're still working on it. We have in-person training day. We have two separate, I don't have that one up. I flipped because it should be on my slide. So give me a second. I will tell it to you right now because I have it on my calendar. August 1st. That is a Friday. Now, that training is on the politics of historic preservation, which is probably really important right now, but just community support, getting out into the community. Some of that will be really useful for the Architectural Review Board, but some of that will be useful for you as the Historic Preservation Commission. This is a specific training just for us. I'm working with a virtual training just for us with NACP, and I've asked for certain speakers, but they haven't gotten back to me yet. They've said yes, but now they're trying to get everything lined up. I'm hoping to know within a day or two. And then the last one, I sent you that email. The National Alliance of Preservation Commissions is having what they call a short course. It's virtual. It's August 20th and 21st. There's a full agenda of different things. I'm the one leading the community outreach, not to hammer that in too much, but of course you should all listen to at least some of it. But it's a really good, this is the national trainers. It is a good group. I work with some of these people on a regular basis. This is a good chance to hear how other communities handle some of the same challenges, how they work through them, how big cities might do it differently than a small city, and of course Decatur's like in the middle just right, so we can kind of pick from both as needed. And definitely to track your training hours, because the end of the year I will ask, because as a certified local government, one of our responsibilities that we uphold to is we have to let them know training hours, because they do require training hours. So please track those. And I always send out around October, that's when the fiscal year shifts, you'll get that email from me saying, I need to know what you did and when. So
Is the meeting on the 1st, you know a time yet?
I am guessing late morning. He's supposed to send me an email, and I haven't received one yet, other than a confirmation of the actual date. And it's at Morgan County Archives, so it's John's building. We'll be up on the 2nd floor. Anything else?
If we're on to other business, I have a question.
Sure.
Phil Wyrick, I understand, resigned. What district, who appointed, what district is he?
He is Ladner. Is that 3? I think Ladner is 3.
Have you made a suggestion or comment about?
I had someone that I had reached out to, and I'm trying to confirm what district they're in, because they had shown interest before. But if you know of anyone within District 3, this is certainly you and we can discuss if you're aware of someone.
I didn't know what district it was, that's fine. Okay. I just wondered if.
Yeah, I had someone else request, but they're District 2, and I was like, well, they might work on the ARB, but
No.
HPC, we don't need anybody from District 2 right now. So.
I just know that's Southwest, but I don't know what part of Southwest it is.
I don't know on a map.
Yeah.
I just,
Are you in what district or y'all in?
You're in Hunter Pepper's district, I think. Who's
No.
your,
No, because he's 4.
These 4.
and who's 5? That would be,
Maybe that's Jacob's district.
maybe it is. I was thinking Phil was in Jacob's district, but maybe he's in McMaster's. I'll have to go in. I was just informed like a day ago, so I have to go in and check.
McMaster's is southeast in Vernon Trail.
Yeah, because McMaster's butts right up against District 2.
Which is Kyle.
Yeah, so it's like Billy's, Kyle's, McMaster's, then I think it goes Ladner, and the far end is maybe Peppers, I think, is the,
Well, around Woodmead, I know, is District 4.
yeah,
Because that's where I was.
yeah. So, but if I can, and when I find out which district it's in, Trudy, I can let you know, in case you know someone.
We
Yeah,
might do, because it would be nice to have someone that we know is really interested in what we do.
absolutely.
I mean, not that whoever's appointing from the council would take that into consideration, I know they would.
No, I will follow up with you on that.
Would you see?
Which district?
Yeah,
District 5 is taken away.
5 is Ladner,
Okay.
and 3 is 3 Pepper,
No, 4 is Pepper.
4, you just said.
3 is Carlton Master.
3 is Carlton. I was sure. get his lawn. Well, I think Hunter just announced that he's not going to